hope all of you are doing well. Today I'm going to be talking about the evolution of jade through the dynasties. It actually originated from the Neolithic times. There are so many dynasties of China, so I'm going to be touching just on the main dynasties. So we're going to be starting off with the Zhou dynasty, which is the longest serving dynasty of China. It started in 1046 BC, and the Zhou people, or some people pronounce it as Zhou. So the Zhou dynasty was the biggest stumbling block for the Qing dynasty when the emperor wanted to unify the whole of China. They were such a stalwart nation. They really didn't want to give up their territory. They didn't want to pay obeisance to the Qing emperor, and they fought and fought till the very end. So I really admire them for that. So the Zhou dynasty is actually much more well renowned for their bronzeware, and then you can see that their aesthetics is very bold and it carries over to their jade pieces. And also you have to consider the period in time, which is 1,000 years BC. They would have just rudimentary tools, and I still think they were so far ahead of the other civilizations who most probably were just using animal bones. So, and then the next dynasty, obviously you have to start with the Qing dynasty, which was the first unified dynasty of China. Emperor Shi Huangdi established the mandate of heaven. He also created Chinese characters because he wanted every single state to speak the same language and to write in the same language. Prior to him taking over the throne, every single state had their own language. And I'm going to explain the reason why I started with the Zhou dynasty, because I tried my level best to find images of jade pieces from the Qing period, and I couldn't find even a single one of them. So I would say, because the period of time is very close to the Zhou dynasty, their pieces would also be very bold, chunky pieces. And the only excerpt I have is from a period drama, which is very well done. It was a very big budget drama. You can see that in the costumes, in the set designs, in the number of people involved in that drama series. And they depicted the emperors as having very big chunky pieces, very in your face. I think that would have been true to the aesthetics of the Qing dynasty, because the emperor himself was very bold with his vision. He carried over his grandfather's dream of establishing a unified China. His grandfather couldn't manage to do that. His own father tried to do so as well, but without success. So he finally managed to do it. So even though his dynasty only lasted for about 100 years, sadly speaking, but we still have to touch on this fabulous emperor who managed to unify the whole of China. And then the next dynasty that I would like to touch on is the Han Dynasty. So some would call this the first cultural period of Chinese history. There was a lot of fighting in between periods, and this was so-called the first cultural period of China. You can see here an excerpt of one of the tombs of the nobility. The mummy was totally encased with jade and with gold hinges. So this really reminds me of the sarcophagus of the King Tut, which also made use of lapis lazuli and gold. So at that point in time, you would think that why lapis? Because usually lapis nowadays is a very affordable and very easily available everywhere. Because at that point in time, ladies and gentlemen, diamonds have not been discovered yet. So jade, as in the pharaoh's time, jade was very precious gemstone to them. It's such a indelible part of the Chinese culture. Anytime you mention jade, people immediately assimilate it with the Chinese culture. So during the Han Dynasty, you can see some of the pieces, they are much more aesthetically sort of more refined from the period of the Zhou Dynasty. Obviously, by this period in time, almost 800 years have passed by from the Zhou Dynasty to to the Han Dynasty. The Han Dynasty existed from 206 to 220 BC, and they established the civil examination. There was also the invention of paper, the water clock, and the sundial. And then the third dynasty that I would like to touch on is the Tang Dynasty. The Tang Dynasty existed from 618 to 907, and by this time, this is the second cultural period in Chinese history, or some would argue it to be the best cultural period in the ancient world. It was a very, very cosmopolitan society. The Silk Road reopened again. The Daming Palace in Chang'an makes the Forbidden City looks like a cottage. It was absolutely humongous, and even emissaries from all over the world visited and paid obeisance to the emperor. We also have two of the most fabulous women in Chinese history. Number one, Empress Wu, the only empress of China. The stories about her wickedness and her ways and means to ascend to power is legendary. The more modern history tries to denote her as a victim. I don't know about killing your own baby just to put the blame on someone else, but the older history books totally denotes her as a very, very evil and wicked person who would stop at nothing for power. And then number two, you have Yang Guifei, who is considered one of the four beauties of China. She was the favorite of Empress Xuanzong, and because of her, she actually coerced him to let go of his court duties. And then her brother came more and more into power and prominence and wealth, and that created a lot of friction in court and a lot of jealousy from the old nobility. And in the end, the court officials and ministers forced Emperor Xuanzong to order the killing of both. So during the Tang Dynasty, as it is one of the most culturally elite and wealthy periods in Chinese history, you have got some fabulous pieces from that period as well. You can see that they have much more of a feminine touch because, as I mentioned, we have two of the most fabulous women in Chinese history. This is exactly why the jade pieces from that period seems to have much more of a feminine aesthetics to it and much more refined than the other periods in the Chinese dynasties to this point in time. Now the next dynasty of China, this is considered the third cultural peak in Chinese dynasty, which is the Song Dynasty. So it existed from 960 to 1279, and this was also one of the most richest periods in Chinese history. The Song Dynasty thrived, and it is very, very well known for its celadon, the Song celadon, which is the green celadon, as well, which is called the Longchuan celadon, which is sort of like a jade green color. So this is one of the most highest period in Chinese cultural history. And so before the Song Dynasty, only people from the nobility were able to enjoy things like tea drinking, poetry, and calligraphy and drawing. But during the Song Dynasty, there was the emergence of the middle class, so people were enjoying tea. The Song Dynasty was one of the richest periods in Chinese history. They were also well known for the discovery of gunpowder, but they used it for fireworks display. And by this time, the Mongols were already consolidating their power. They have managed to occupy most of China, and their last stumbling block was the Song Dynasty. So the Song Dynasty beefed up their army and everything, but the force of the Mongols were too great great for them. So General Lu at the Battle of Yamen grabbed the crown prince, who was then only 7 years old, and jumped into the sea, and both of them committed suicide because, as he put it, they would rather die than surrender to the enemy. And so the Song dynasty ended. I think it's really ironical that they were the ones who discovered gunpowder, but they didn't make use of it at the battle, and they were enjoying themselves so much they thought that their power would last forever, but obviously it didn't last. That is the thing about the Chinese dynasties. Every one of them trying to consolidate their power and overthrowing the other. And during the Song period, we can see some absolutely fabulous pieces of jade because, as I mentioned, they were the first ones who really heightened the Celadon to a new level. Some consider the Song dynasty Celadons to be the best in the world, even surpassing later dynasties. It's absolutely beautiful. So you can see the same kind of aesthetics and symmetry in their jade pieces. Absolutely very quiet, luxury kind of a look to it, where they allow the jade to shine through the colors of the jade. They're using a lot of mutton fat. They're using very fine, smooth lines for their jade pieces. So then you come to the next dynasty, which is the Yuan dynasty from 1271 to 1368. So a lot of Chinese history books, even until now, have always depicted the Yuan dynasty very in a bad light because they always consider them as foreigners who came and overtake China, and they were Mongols and they were considered barbaric and nomadic people, and they took away parts of China which still remains under Tibet. Only recently, for example, that they have discovered some blue and white ceramics from the Yuan dynasty which people mistook from being from the Ming dynasty. So actually the blue and white china, although it's synonymous with the Ming dynasty, the acknowledgement actually belongs to the Yuan dynasty. And you would think that since they are nomadic people and sort of like barbarians who are always like going around attacking people, they expanded their territories. And then when you look at their jade pieces, you would be astounded. I was thinking maybe probably their jade pieces would be almost like from the Zhou dynasty, very in your face, very bold pieces, which is different from the Song dynasty. But their pieces of jade surprisingly are quite beautiful. I think it reflects their free spirit as well, being nomadic people. That is exactly why I'm so fascinated with jade, because you can't just categorize jade as one type of a look. You are going through so many dynasties of China, and you're going through thousands and thousands of years of history, the different periods and the different aesthetics. And after the Yuan dynasty comes the Ming dynasty. So the Ming dynasty is from 1368 to 1644. So the Ming dynasty, obviously, you would associate the blue and white china from the Ming dynasty, as well as the Ming dynasty furniture, their aesthetics, the Ming dynasty furniture being so contemporary that it still looks very modern. They are truly way ahead of their time. If you would like to know more about the Huanghuali furniture, I've done a video on that. I'm going to be linking it towards the end, which I did just prior to this video. The Ming dynasty was the first dynasty that established the where the Forbidden City is. He created a new palace because he didn't want to have anything or any association with the previous Yuan dynasty. The Forbidden City actually only housed the Ming dynasty as well as the Ching dynasty. Now, the previous dynasties had their palaces in other parts of China. So when you look at the pieces of jade from the Ming dynasty, obviously it reflects totally the aesthetics of their ceramics, the blue and white ceramics, as well as their furniture. Very simplistic, very elegant look to them, almost very modern pieces in their craftsmanship. Absolutely beautiful. I think a lot of the aesthetics is to do with symmetry as well as design, because and during the time of the three main emperors of the period, which is the Kangxi Emperor, and then his son the Yongzheng Emperor, as well as his grandson the Qianlong Emperor. They were considered the richest man on the face of the planet. They even had Italian painters attached to the court, the most famous being Giuseppe Castiglione, who was attached with the Qianlong Emperor. The Qianlong Emperor's imperial seal, which was auctioned off for $20 million by Sotheby's of Asia, and that was when the eyes of the world really opened up to know more about the mutton fat jade, because in the modern world people are much more aware of the green jade but not so much of the mutton fat jade. As well as, I would like to point out that I forgot to mention at the beginning of the video that all the imperial jade pieces have always been gotten from Khotan, and the Burmese jade only started to come in the 18th century, so during this period, which is the Ching dynasty, the last dynasty of China. Now, a lot of the times people are saying that the imperial royal family were wearing the jadeite jade, which is absolute rubbish, because as I mentioned, all the jade pieces came from the Khotan period, and all the jade pieces up to the period of the Qing dynasty, when the Burmese jade only started coming in the 18th century, were nephrite jade. So if you look at the jade pieces in the imperial palace, it was mostly nephrite jade. So this period, as I mentioned, was one of the most prosperous up to the period of the Qianlong Emperor, and they had absolutely fabulous pieces of jade. You can see that because Emperor Qianlong was a connoisseur, he had a great eye, and he collected ceramics from the previous dynasties, he collected jade pieces, he collected jade seals, he was into poetry. In a lot of the jade pieces, he actually incorporated his own poetry onto the jade pieces being etched on it, and you can see some examples of it. So he was a man of the world with truly refined taste. He had the court painters from Italy paint his images, and that is exactly why ceramics during this period had much more color suddenly come into it, because of the influence of the Italian painters. Much as I love the Qianlong Emperor and the Qing dynasty, I have to admit that some of the pieces can be quite garish, and because the period in time is so vast and they had so much wealth, so even their jade pieces, some of them are absolutely gorgeous to look at, and some of them are truly actually over the top and absolutely garish. So I'm just going to be showcasing the pieces that are absolutely beautiful. You can see that by this time it is the best of the best and the finest of the finest, because as I mentioned, Emperor Qianlong had absolutely refined taste, and he can demand whatever that he wanted. He was the richest man in the whole world, and you can see some absolutely fine pieces here that he would get done for himself, as well as his concubines, as well as his emperors are wearing absolutely fabulous pieces of jade. I would say during the Qing period, it's almost like they want to show off their wealth, and you can see that absolutely in their jade pieces. You can see they are stupendous, over the top pieces meant to awe and meant to stun the whoever was looking at the piece of jade, so that without a shadow of a doubt you will know that they are some of the wealthiest people on the face of this earth. It's the consolidation of power. They were very much on top of the world, because they had that absolute sense of security, coming from the Kangxi Emperor down to Yongzheng and then down to Qianlong, and he had a wealth of time on his hands to indulge in this very exorbitant pastime that only the super wealthy can indulge in, which also commands some of the highest prizes in the world till today in auction houses. And then you can definitely see that in the aesthetics of the jade pieces as well, and meant to show the finest workmanship. Okay, I just wanted to end this video with nothing to do with the dynasties, because we're talking about jade and the Chinese culture. I just wanted to include an excerpt from one of my favorite films, The Joy Luck Club. If you have not seen it, you should. It's an absolutely beautiful masterpiece. So in that film, the main character Ming and her mother has a rival, which is Waverly and her mother. So in that film, Ming-na's mother was portrayed as having to run away from China because there was a war going on, and then they had to throw their property away and move to America. So this is where And I want to put a disclaimer out there. I don't want people to say that I'm jade shaming anyone, because a lot of the times in my video people are asking me how can I tell a good quality jade from a poor quality jade. So this is one example of it. To be fair, in the movie later on there is a scene where they're playing mahjong and all ladies are using fabulous pieces of jade, but I wanted to hone into this excerpt where you can see Mingna's mother is wearing an absolutely fabulous piece of jade pendant in an olive green color, which is a very unusual color. And you can see that the clasp itself is antique style using pure gold, because the modern pieces of jade, the clasp is not as soft looking as the old pieces. It is very harsh because they are using more modern cutting to it, so the clasp makes the whole thing looks very harsh sometimes. So you can see that Mingna's mother is wearing an absolutely fabulous piece of jade. It is carved as well and it's quite substantial in size. Now size doesn't mean that the jade is better. I just want to put it out there as well. But in this case, when you compare Mingna's mother's jade pendant as opposed to Waverly's mother's jade pendant, I don't know whether this was on purpose or whether it was written in the book, because I've never read the book. You can see that Waverly mother's pendant is so much more of a lower quality. I remember when I was growing up and I would follow my mom to the jewelry store, I can see this type of heart-shaped pendant being sold in the dozens and just thrown in a tray, because it was a very cheap kind of a jade where people would actually use this kind of a jade for teenagers or young girls, but not on an elderly lady. So when you compare the difference between Mingna's mother's jade pendant and Waverly's mother's pendant, it's so totally opposite. Plus the jade pendant that Waverly's mother is wearing, the heart-shaped one, the color is flat and dull. So this is one example where I always say buy the best that you can afford, because when it looks almost ridiculous, because when you are in this kind of scenario, people, when they look at the difference between the jade that Mingna's mother is wearing and Waverly's mother is wearing, is comparing like heaven and earth. It's totally different. One is so much superior in terms of color, in terms of the luster, in terms of the carvings on it. And this is exactly where in the next scenario where Mingna's mother actually passes on and she is now wearing it as an heirloom piece. So it is worthy of an heirloom piece. Obviously some people would say that some pieces of jade that they have is not really expensive and they have sentimental value attached to it. I'm not, as I mentioned again, I'm not jade shaming, but thank you so much for staying with me till the end and for watching this video. I truly appreciate it. I hope that you've enjoyed the journey and how jade has evolved through the dynasties of China, and how I ended it with the Joy Luck Club, where it is still being worn today. It is such an indelible part of the Chinese culture. It's such an absolutely beautiful piece of gemstone. It is, I think, one of the gemstones besides pearls that really exudes quiet elegance, and it's the oldest gemstone in the world. It has been worn since the Neolithic time, which is really around 6,000 years BC. And I hope to see you again in my next video. If you want to look at other jade videos which I've done, I will be linking the playlist towards the end. You can browse through them at your leisure.